He served the Archaeology Survey of India up to long time, and as a deputy superintendent of archaeologists, he worked, and he has participated in an excavation at Bhimbetka, Dholavira, Sanchi, Putwar, and apart from this, on the basis of his experience and work, he published more than 170 papers and presented over 60 his presentation in a different national and international conferences. Now, with this introduction of Dr. J. Manuel, I request Dr. J. Manuel to start his presentation. Friends, this presentation will be online because of his busy schedule, he was not able to join here, but he is presenting his work from outskirts, and I welcome Dr. J. Manuel sir in the one-day workshop, as well as I request him to start his work. Yes, sir, please.
Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
How can I upload the PowerPoint?
Sir, you will have to share the screen. Click on share the screen and present the presentation. Sir, your screen is already shared, so you can just start the presentation.
I don't find how I can add this. Can you guide me?
You can click on the share screen and then you can choose the PowerPoint presentation. Currently, you are using your Chrome browser.
Your screen, new share. Shall I?
You have to stop sharing first.
Stop sharing.
Yes.
Okay.
You can go for share screen.
Okay, share screen.
And then you have to choose the PowerPoint where you open the PowerPoint.
Okay. First, I think I have to open the PowerPoint first.
Yes. Yes, we can see your slides. You can adjust your camera a little bit. Yes.
Is it okay?
Yes. Perfect, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My topic is Jaina evidence discernible from Harappan civilization, including evidence of the casein mentioned in Rigved Mandal 10, hymn number 136 as first Tirthankar Rishabhnath. Actually, the title seems to say that in Rigved, the hymn is saying that it is itself is first Tirthankar Rishabhnath, but it is not as such. But the hymn is pointing towards such a possibility. There it mentions as casein only, and he is shown depicted as having long hair and also having is naked in the middle. So now this is the heading. Now what I'm trying to say is that as early as 1950s, scholars have said that evidence of Jainism is discernible from the Harappan civilization, but off and on it is reiterated, including letters by myself and Brijesh Rawat and several other people, but it is not taken seriously. Here again, an attempt is being made, and for showing that there are credible evidences of Jainism. You cannot expect that the Jainism of the Mahavira times would be seen in the Jainism of Rishabhnath. And so you can only discern some evidences. As you know, across all religions, changes have crept in. For example, even in Christianity, for example, from the one religion, one part to another, Protestants and like that, and many like that. So, Tirthankar's depiction and the philosophy they have said has continued interpreted differently by several groups of people, and some depictions and some theorization, some dispensation about the philosophy changes partially, and therefore everything may not be exactly as is in the present Jainism. So, for example, many authors have said it, and Kayotsar, Digambar, TC, and stone images depiction in seal matters closely resemble Jainism. For example, Kayotsar Mudra is seen in the shown depicted in the deity standing in the alcove of vegetation. Now, this is common because today's Tirthankara images also have sometimes the flora on both sides of the Sinhasana, the three around the three chatra, and some propensity for the motifs and the themes of the Harappan civilization has been seen commonly in the Jaina artifacts also. For example, trefoil symbols of the Harappan, which is very well known by all the Harappan scholars. Recently, there has been rice ritual has been noted in. I mean, it is in Jain temples also. It is common, and this has been seen in a ritual in Chanudoro site, which shows that the a terracotta triangular cake has rice kept in the swastik pattern. So this is also seen in Jainism. So there are many things which show that the roots of Jainism was definitely in the Harappan civilization. You can see some of the images. This is from Harappa. This one from Harappan seal. This is the Kayotsar Mudra, and it's in alcove. So every Tirthankar has a tree identified with him. So these are some ethos or ethics which have been continuously shown to have persisted across the millenniums. The naked figure, one may say, if it is not the hairdo of the Rishabhnath, it may as well as be the crown. For example, in Jivant Swami images of Mahavira, you can the crown is shown, and crown is otherwise not shown. But in the images which are supposed to have been carved out during the lifespan of the Tirthankara, it is shown with the crown. So several images, not only from Mohenjo-daro, and in this Rakhi Gadi also, Dholavira also, there are. Now one sees this image of a seated deity and two lesser gods or yaksha type figures having the symbol, the snake behind it. And now there are Parshvanath, Suparshvanath, and yakshas with holding snakes. This all show that the possibility is there. Now, for example, across the dispensations of Jainism itself, the ayuds may differ. Further, the mythical animals also, much of it is carried down into the, from the Harappan into the Jaina images. And for example, in Kankali Tila, one of the major factors, one of the major thing is exact trefoil symbol of the Harappan. It is not only seen in this Mohenjo-daro figure, but in many, even for example, in small cubes also, there are the trefoil symbol. And here you see on the crocodile trefoil symbol, it is in the Jaina Stupa Kankali Tila. This is again trefoil symbol of woman bathing in Kankali Tila. The intersecting circles, which is very, very common in the this Harappan civilization, is seen in Kankali Tila and Lomas Rishi caves also. This is one of the images of the Tirthankar-like images, very much Kayasar Mudra, definitely naked. And this although is having a crown-like thing, but across you have to give some leeway for at least 2000 years of earlier thing, because the god and the divinity had to be shown. Any accomplished person had to be shown with crown to show him different. So later it was not shown. The mere presence, the knowledge itself was seen as important. So we can see there are several aspects of Jainism clearly seen in the Harappan civilization. These are only few of these, and can see the continuity of the symbols and the motifs from the Harappan times to the Sramanas and especially the Jaina. Again, the trefoil motifs. Now, for example, a practice to prepare a swastika and a symbol of three jewels with a crescent using raw rice is still prevailing in Jaina shrines. This I came to know recently. But here we have the rice. It is kept as paddy. You can see the central slit of the paddy husk. And if you keep this, it can be, the swastiks can be made is anti-clockwise and clockwise. Now, for example, if this is shown, then you draw a line like this, it is a clockwise. And if you draw another line, for example, from here to here, and from here to this place, this is anti-clockwise, as you can see here. There are anti-clockwise, and rice is shown in this swastik, but the intermittent lines between the swastik, the main cardinal lines are not shown. That is interesting, but rice and the possibility of both the swastiks are shown in the Chanudara terracotta tile, triangular terracotta tile, and it is very much interesting. So this I have prepared to show here, where the filling in the blanks have been shown in the unidirectional of right-facing this swastikas. This itself could be made as left-facing. Only you have to keep this rice here and this another rice from here, and it will be anti-clockwise. So besides the trefoil patterns, swastikas intersecting circles, there are many continuities from Harappan times, though not unique to Jainism, but also to the other Sramanas. The propensity for the same in Jaina context seems to be conspicuous, which hints the continuity of the ancestral lineage from the Harappans. These are rhinoceros, pair of fishes, composite animal, and human figurine, deity under tree or vegetal alcove, etc. These are more conspicuously found in Jaina art remains. The accomplished yogi of the Rigved Mandal 10:136. One should say that initially the Rigvedic people were not so cozy with the other people who were they were, but many things were said about them. But in this Rigveda, which is Rigved Mandal, which is quite later, Mandal 10 is known to be later. And the hymn number 136 mentions of a Rigvedic seers where the least said not overtly found of non-Vedic people, though it seems some interactions and assimilations were there. The one hymn which shows the accomplishment of other people is depicted in Rigved 10:136. Here in the Muni, Yogi is shown to be very accomplished. He can soar up to the skies. He is shown as long-haired and naked in the middle. Certainly, so is Rishabhnath, the first Tirthankar. Now we can see some of the scholars, because as you may be knowing that the Vedic Sanskrit is definitely not same as the present day Sanskrit. So scholars have interpreted on the basis of several expositions by several earlier scholars in the of 5 centuries and many centuries earlier. So definitely their interpretation may have colored the interpretation of the present day modern scholars. But one thing is clear, that the casin is long-haired, and the casin is some scholars say he is naked in the middle. Some people say that some scholars say that he is wearing brown clothes. Some scholars say that he is smeared with yellow soil. So there are differences in the interpretation of this hymn itself, as is for several other hymns also. But the point is that some clue towards the possible identity of the Adi Purusha, the Rishabhnath, who is known as Kesin, is also there from Mohenjo-daro. This is the Mohenjo-daro sculptures found headless. Now, the point is that initially the Vedic people, it seems, were not so very much in agreement with the Harappan people, and there were some breakages because it is not one sculpture which has been broken down with long hair. There are others also, another same from the Mohenjo-daro report. So here also the recent excavations from 91 onwards in Dholavira, one sculpture was found lying in the mud, broken down with head. It is headless and it is nude. The excavator says that the rear is close to realistic. The sculpture is close to realistic, evidence of depiction of hair lots falling down, which is also damaged. It was certainly vandalized, possibly just like all the statues which were found in Mohenjo-daro. Genitals were intentionally rubbed off and damaged. A mold was prepared of this statue and a cast was prepared, which clearly indicates the closer details of even the genitals. This also clearly indicated the rubbing off of the genitals intentionally, while the other details of it were clearly visible. It suggests that it was related to phallus worship, which is nicely corroborated by quite a few finials of pillars which carving in the shape of phallus. Now, the report by the excavator says that it is clearly, although phallus also is shown, definitely most of the people, the scholars, do not disagree with the possibility of Shiva But the point is that many scholars are averse to linking the evidence with Jainism. For example, if the presence of the phallus was epiphalic, definitely it could have been the phallus worship. But if it was sedentary or sedated phallus, then it would be more related to Jainism. And other things also show that it is related to Rishabhnath. For example, this is the rubbed off groin area, and this is the hair locks falling on shoulders. So we move forward. The head portion is the head was intentionally chopped off, and this is belonging to the mature Harappan phase, as this statue is found from a secondary context belonging to stage phase, stage 6. By the time of stage 7, which is after a hiatus, even the mature Harappan phase has this sculpture, which was broken down and was found in stage 6. After that, also the people had abandoned, and stage 7, it was almost rudimentary type of life. So it seems that there was some breakages, some problems, and some group of people, who they were, we cannot say. At least Rigvedic people, if the this is identified as identified as Rishabhnath, then it could be said that the Rigvedic people, even if it was broken down before, Rigvedic people acknowledge the accomplishment of the yogi who could fly into the sky and merge with the winds, and many superlatives are said in the case in hymn Rigveda 10:136. And it seems that initially the sculptures were broken down in Mohenjo-daro and Dholavira. Later, due to because of the cultural differences, later when people settled down, there was some acknowledgement of the people, non-Vedic people also. Though as well is as is well known that there are several rituals which malign non-Vedic people, as the Vratyas, Anasas, means noseless, Shishan Devta means the worshippers of the phallus, etc. However, the author of this particular hymn, Rigveda 10:136, was sympathetic to the non-Vedic people also. This is, as is evident, is during the compilation of the later Rigveda Mandal 10. And some communications had already been established between the initial immiscible people. We can therefore identify the images from Dholavira and Mohenjo-daro as that of Casing, which is another name of Rishabhnath. Though these images may not be of lifetime, but memory images, as was thought by the Harappans later in time. In fact, the images of the first Tirthankara are partly variant, verily due to the fact the followers conceived the figures across time and space towards the later part of the mature Harappans differently of a great sage who may have had been in existence about the early Harappan period. One cannot say the exact time, who laid the foundation for the ethics of the civilization. A reiteration of the sculptures found, the sculpture with the snake hood and the Kaisar Mudra, the broken images of the possible case in image as Rishabhnath, and how Rishabhnath, the founding father, also Rishabhnath also is Adinath, and also he has similarities with the Shiva also, and he is also having bull as Yaksha, while Shiva also has bull as vehicle. So there are many similarities which not only show that the Saivite affiliation is quite very well acknowledged, but there is need to acknowledge the possibility of the Jaina antecedents in the Harappan civilization. In the light of the above images, as also brought to notice by several scholars earlier, as well as the presence of the continuity of motifs and the themes, is the correlation of the naked long-haired images with Rishabhnath. One can assert that Jainism, though in its initial form, was very much in vogue from the Harappan times, as propounded by Rishabhnath, most probably even before the Harappan lifestyle setting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for very nice and very informative presentation. If participants are having any questions, any query regarding this presentation, so only one or two questions we will take. Is there any questions? So that I will announce that question here. Sir will reply from that side. Any question, any query regarding the presentation? One or two questions. Sir, please. Yeah. You can come. What is your question? Sir, Professor Manager Singh sir is here, and you was asking, have you published this whatever the work you have shown in any kind of research journal somewhere?
Sir, good afternoon. Warm welcome. I know you are present there. I mean, it's a great occasion to have communication with you. Sir, as per present, I have sent an article regarding this this interaction of the Rigvedic people and I mean particularly with the Rigvedic Mandal 10 hymn 136 and the possibility of the Rishabhnath. I have sent an article, but it is not published as yet.
Okay, sir. Okay. So we will wish you all the best, sir. But this work, very valuable material that you need to publish, sir, so that the readers they can read it and it will get lot of informative. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your very nice presentation once again, and give the big hand to our J. Manuel, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, sir. Yeah. Friend, afterwards, the second lecture after the lunch session is from our very well-known Buddhist and Jain speaker, our Dr. Shikant Ganvir. Dr. Shikant Ganvir is last 15 years, he is working here as a expertise in a Buddhist and Jain studies, and he has carried out lot of explorations, and he attended and he personally carried out lot of excavations, especially some Buddhist excavation at Andhra region he was carried out, and he visited number of Jain and Buddhism sites. Of course, not visit, but he has carried out lot of trainings of the student at different monuments, and he is having tremendous source of information, and without he has published so many papers, but apart from the publication, so the training as well as some workshops and in the form of some exploration and excavation, he has carried out lot of work in our university. And without taking much time, I invite Dr. Shikant Ganvir sir to deliver his lecture on a very special topic, that is Jain caves of Maharashtra. So one thing I forgot to tell you, his study is concerned about the Buddhist caves and Jain caves, especially in Maharashtra. He has carried out tremendous work in the cave studies. So I request Ganvir sir to start his lecture. Yes, sir, please.
The head of Professor P.D. Sabre sir, the head of Department of AISC in Archaeology, Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, deemed to be University. Dr. Nilima Jain Madam and her associates. So I take an opportunity to thank my own institute, Deccan College, as well as Tirtha Saurakshini Mahasabha for organizing today's workshop on very important topic, not only to understand our past, but also in a present context, that is on Jain heritage. And I will be talking on the early Jain caves of Western Deccan or Maharashtra. And major objective was to bring out such rock-cut caves which are struggling for their identity, first thing. Secondly, also not in a very good state of preservation. In the 21st century, when we are in such an advanced era, and the caves which are not very far away from the Pune, one of the very important educational and high-tech cities, and these caves are basically struggling for their preservation. So probably, instead of talking on well-known monuments, I have been intentionally selected them as they are hardly visited by anyone. The today's presentation is a revised and enlarged version of the paper jointly presented by our senior colleague Dr. Srikant Pradhan and I at the International Conference of Jainism held in October 2019. And when it is not working. नहीं हो रहा है ना ऐसा? आ रहा है? आवाज जातोय? येतोय. So, ठीक है, येतोय ना. In the late 60s of last century, when a Jain inscription, a small Jain cave with an inscription was found, it was a major breakthrough, not only in the history of rock cut architecture of the Deccan as such, but in the history of Jainism of Maharashtra. Although we know that how the Jainism was disseminated in the state of Karnataka during the 3rd century BC, and we have आवाज येतोय वारंवार. So the finding of a small cave at a Pale, as I mentioned, was a really a breakthrough. Although Burgess in 1885, followed by James Campbell, mentioned some of the rock cut caves, which are not very clearly distinguished as mentioned by them. But unfortunately, the caves on which I will be talking, like Pale or Lohogarh Wadi, have never become basically a prime focus of the study of monastic architecture. That is a really sad part of the such a flourishing tradition of rock cut architecture in India. Ramchandra Bhide, an account or an administrative officer by profession, working in University of Pune, wrote a very important article in the 60s, mid-60s of the last century, and mentioned many of such interesting caves whose religious affiliation is not very clearly understood. Many of them are not easily accessible as such, and also not in a good state of preservation. It was Ramchandra Bhide and his associates who basically were seminal to draw attention of two scholars. First, Professor S.D. Sanklia, the father of Indian archaeology or father of modern Indian archaeology, who founded the department at this very much institute in 1939, and a great scholar of handling or having a profound knowledge of many disciplines, along with Dr. Shobna Gokhale, a very well-known former faculty of Deccan College and very well-known scholar of epigraphy and numismatics. They deciphered that inscription and claimed its affiliation with Jainism, which has been a major breakthrough in the studies of Indian architecture, rock cut architecture, as well as Jainism. Besides that, Dr. Srikant Pradhan visited the Uksan and Kambre caves. Vivek Kare, along with his many colleagues, Dr. Abhinav Kurkute, Sai Prasad Belsare, Amey Joshi, and many others. So Mr. Vivek Kale, along with his associates, carried out or have been carrying out the exploration in the region of Mawal for more than a decade, who or which further resulted into findings or discovery of many of such a caves which need to be reinvestigated, which need to be re-examined in the context of Jainism and Jain monastic architecture. This is a map showing the location of important caves like Bhaje, then we have the Karle, Bersa, which are the early Buddhist caves, as we know. The Pale, one of the early Jain caves of India, ancient India, and then also the Lohagad Wadi, another complex of early Jain caves of India, as well as of the Deccan as well as India. And this is a map prepared by Abhinav Kurkute. And here you can see that the caves like Pale, which has been clearly shows affiliation with Jainism. So the Pale is a Jain cave. Then Lohagad Wadi, where we have a group of many Jain caves which are not yet been clearly studied at various levels of the fort. And then the question, then there is again the big question regarding the identification or the affiliation of the caves at Uksan and the Kambare. So the religious affiliation of these caves, that is the Uksan and Kambare, has not been fully established by the scholars as such. So, as I told that the 68-69 year was a very important year in the history of the Jainism of India. Hardly anyone knows. The finding of the Pale inscription, and still the inscription deciphered by, studied by Professor S.D. Sanklia and Dr. Shobna Bhosle, published in the volume of Epigraphia in 1971. And later on, it was also re-examined by Professor S.D. Sanklia in 1975. It is the late 2nd century before the Common Era to the early 1st century before the Common Era. Very important comment by Professor Sanklia and Gokhale, I just quote, "This cannot be the only Jain cave here. There must be many more which need to be searched." So this is a very important statement. Rather than comment, I would like to look at as a statement for basically the building of the further foundation of the history of Jainism or monastic architecture. Many of the scholars do not agree with this is a one side. When we look at the academics, we have to basically look at the different sides. So many of the scholars, I don't want to take their names, but that is a reality. And this is a very well preserved in their writings. Agree with what the opinions or the statements made by Professor Sanklia and Gokhale. Many of them still think that probably the caves at Pali could be the Buddhist cave. But why it is a Jain cave and how Professor Sanklia and Gokhale talk about, I will be discussing shortly. So this is the cave at Pali, the only single cave. And when we look at the architecture, as we know that every religion, it's a monasticism, its architecture have a certain fundamental principles. And basically the making of the architecture is a very much do with basically the principles of religion and basically the practices, the monastic codes and so on. And this is a plan prepared by our friend, Vivek. And this is basically the natural cave where we find that a small cell as well as the bench and also the water cistern are there. So niche is there. And this is basically the photograph of the cave. So we know that. I already say in my classroom also with that probably I personally feel that the religion is probably the eighth only. Or suppose I can say one of the only, but I personally say that probably the only religion, Indic religion, which has been following their principles very orthodoxly since its foundation. And especially the members of their monastic sangha they are very strictly and orthodoxly following. And still, whenever you go and travel, you will find that Jain Munis and Sadhus, they are basically traveling, and following the monastic rules as mentioned in their canonical text. So you can also find how these caves are very simple, and almost there is an absence of any kind of the ornamentation. There is a niche. And what is important is that basically the inscription. And this inscription, as I told, a major breakthrough. It reads basically Namo Arhantanam Katunam the Badanta Idarakhitene Lena Karapitam Podicha Sahakahi Saha. For the veneration to the Arhantas. Badanta Idarakshit, that is in Sanskrit Indarakshit, probably together with some others, that is the colleagues, that is the members of the Sangha, caused to the cave and the cistern to be excavated. And as this Pali inscription, as Professor Sankali and Professor Gokhale, their long experience of the working in the field of epigraphy, placed very safely in the 2nd century before the Common Era. So when the Buddhist caves were being excavated like Bhaje and other sites, same time the Jain caves were also being excavated. So probably I see the entire process in a very long kind of the canvas, like a shamanic movement. I always see that in the 6th century before Common Era is the most striking era of the Indian history. That was a revolution. The shamanic religions, not only one or two. If you go through the canonical text of Jains and the Buddhists, it mentions many kind of the 60 more than 60 kind of the such religious ideas and thoughts. In Indian history, never witnessed the emergence of such religious thoughts in any century till the date. That is talks about that how although no doubt, and that is very much natural, must be the set of the differences. But when we look at one side, there is the Buddhist caves where they are like Bhaja, which is again goes to the by 2nd century BC, as we take a general chronology. So Jain caves were also being excavated. So probably I look basically this process as basically how the shamanic religious movements were entered and disseminated in the region of the Western Deccan. So as we know that the discovery of the Pale goes back to the late 60s of the last century. But Lohargarh is a very important fort. It is protected by Archaeological Survey of India. It is a medieval fort. It is one of the such a picnic spots, points or the spots in the Pune district, and has been very frequently visited by many of us. But as I mentioned that James Burgess, then followed by Campbell, they mention the presence of some caves where it was quite difficult to reach, a kind of the inaccessible groups of at many tiers. So the recent studies by Vivek Kale and his associates, they found that there is at least 6 to 7 clusters of such Jain caves in and at, you can say, the Lohargarh. So that shows that probably how the after, as we know that the inscription from the Pale, that is located near Kamshed, how probably it also shows that how the Jainism was disseminating, or you can say the rapidly spreading in this area. And I'm talking about the Eastern group, as I told that there are many groups and many clusters. Unfortunately, some of them are still inaccessible. And thanks to the inscription, the inscriber and the writer of the inscription, otherwise it becomes quite difficult to associate such a large group with Jainism or the Jain monastic architecture. So the cave 1 and 4 are very large and comparatively preserved. Many, as I told, many of the caves are not inaccessible. That is very true, but needs to be studied. The excavation of the cave 7 is very important because it mentions the inscription, again mentioning Venerable, that is a Bhadanta, as mentioned in the inscription, Idarakshit or Indarakshit. So probably these two inscriptions provided, which I will be talking later on, very historical information of one of the very important Jain saints or the Jain Munis of the early historic period. That is almost 2,200 years. How, when probably very, as we know that, if you look at the landscape, of this entire region, it was a very quite difficult either for the Jain monks or the Buddhist monks or basically the religious preachers to establish their religious establishment in a such a days or in a such a time. You can see the times how these religious preachers had made a kind of the attempts to establish the monastic establishments. So as I told, there is a eastern group, there is a northern group, so many caves. And as this is again a very another breakthrough, the finding of this inscription. And there are, as mentioned, the 5 clusters, the 5 groups of Jain caves. Only two have been studied or 2 have been attempts were made to visit or enter into 2 of them. Others are still, as I told, many of them are inaccessible. And this monument is a very much preserved by the Archaeological Survey of India. But the another side is that the caves are not preserved. They are in a very bad state of preservation, and you will be looking after some of the photographs, Yeah. So this is a site plan prepared by Vivek Kare, our friend, and the eastern group has a kind of the 7 caves. That is the cave number 1 and 4 and 6 are very important. So it shows that, because we have certain ideas about the early Buddhist monastic architecture, structural architecture, but hardly any information about how the Jain caves were evolved. We have the very interesting and early Jain caves at Odisha, that is the Udayagiri and Khandagiri. And that is again a kind of the treasure of art historical and architecture, you can say the styles or the idioms. But when we come into the Deccan region, so hardly anyone can think of, the presence of Jain architecture. But yes, the Pale caves and the Lohogadwadi caves provide that how the formation of the monastic architecture in non-structural activity. Because for the structural activity, we have the certain kind of the course or the certain kind of prescribed rules. But where it talks about how one can basically replicate the certain monastic, you can say the rules in the medium of the rock, it becomes challenging. Because as we know that in a rock cut architecture, there are many limitations to basically replicate or to do according to the structural architecture. When you have the structural activity, you have the lot of scope. You can change the plan, you can do the additions, but in rock cut architecture, there were certain limitations. So looking into such limitations, the formation of the early Jain monastic architecture in the Deccan, in the Pune and its vicinity is quite interesting. So see, basically, must be the kind of the residential places of the Jain monks or the religious teachers, preachers, and how, as I talk, I will be also talking about how the inscription provides very interesting information about dimension of the asana pedika, that is the benches. So these 2 Jain inscriptions also providing very seminal information about some of the monastic architecture terms. Like we have basically the Podhi, that is the water cistern, then Vedika. For that we get the Prakrit word Vedika, and that is sometimes mentioned in some of the inscription of the Buddhist inscription of the Western India, but in the context of the Jain inscription, probably the Lohogadwadi is one of the earliest inscription mentioning very specifically the differentiation between the monastic architecture terms. And we have their evidence preserved in these caves. And then there is a socket, must be some kind of the temporary structure. And as I told that, many of the caves are not fully cleared. So we are trying to basically, these caves should be scientifically cleared by the Archaeological Survey of India. And respected Dr. Manager Sir Singh is here, who has been carrying out the conservation and preservation of these monuments for more than 3 or 4 decades. So I will also request him, he's being one of the most senior scholars who dedicated the 40 years of his life for the preservation of our, paintings. So if the paintings of Ajanta and the paintings from the Jain caves of Ellora, if they are now preserved, the credit goes to him, Yeah. So many, so just far away from my topic, many international missions failed. I don't want to take the names of particular missions or country, but finally, when the Indian government found that, we have our own scholar, and I saw that so-called saline, when being a student and after going with student, how these caves were preserved. So probably I'll also request him to this, again, a rich treasure of early Jainism, and probably it also needs to be preserved. And this is again, there are some in medieval period, we have some, the reoccupation. As we know that it happens, many of the monuments after the desertation or the kind of the discontinuity of the presence of particular religious, teachers or the community, they, underwent the process of the reformation or the transformation. But here, what is interesting is that in medieval period, we find that in some of the Jain caves, there were some kind of the structures, the brick structures or the structures made of either bricks or the stones were constructed, and that also probably as a part of our heritage. So, and also show that, how these structures were continuously reoccupied in a different, you can say, the different phases of our times. And all these are the photographs of the caves of Eastern group. I'm not talking about the Northern and others. And you can see that, many of them are in a very bad state of preservation. Because as you know that the Deccan Trap, and there are many geological defects, the red bowl, green bowl, and so on. And also because of the seepage of the water, so various kind of the issues, obviously come while when we talk about the conservation and the preservation of the monuments. That is true, but probably they are very in a very bad state of preservation and needs to be taken into consideration. They have the kind of the niches, they have some kind of the sockets. So probably their further study by the scholars of Jainism, or what was the kind of the significance, which kind of the rituals were being carried out, first thing, and how the Jain saints or the members of the Jain monastic community were basically, what could be the possibilities of using, the such space. When we talk about the space and time, whenever we see any architecture or any basically structure, the 2 points are very important, that is the space and time. And they are jointly referred to as a spatio-temporal context. So any monument, any structure cannot be studied without understanding the context of the space and time. So it is very important to carry out the study of in the spatio-temporal context of Jain caves, because probably those who are not aware with the basically the Jain literature or the principles of Jainism, the Jain monasticism, probably not able to decipher or decode the actual use. Yeah, so very important. As I told that the life of the Jain Munis or the members of the Jain monastic community was and is simple, So in a having known, the such a kind of very organized and a very kind of the strict rules, So probably one has to need, probably how the laity was also associated. So it is also very important to see that where was the Jain community was staying, Yeah. So obviously we know that, the members of the monastic community were not engaged in the making of the food. So obviously there must be a kind of the patronage. There must be a kind of the communities or the settlements which must have been provided the support to the monastic community. So as we know that the members of the monastic community, they were always, wandering from one place to another in the propagation of the teachings of either in the case of Jain monks for Jainism, in the case of Buddhist monks, obviously Buddhism. So in that case, probably that is also important to locate those points, because we cannot study any monument also in isolation. So like because even reaching today these sites is a very difficult. Just think of their landscape and the ways of approaches 2,200 years. So obviously there must be a kind of the organized structure. There must be kind of the organized scheme or system which probably there are some kind of the missing linkages which need to be explored. There were the steps. That is again very important evidence how the one cluster or one group was interconnected with another. And the cells with the sockets, so must be a kind of, as we know that the entire, if you look at this, basically the hills or the Sahyadri mountain ranges full with the kind of the dense forest, obviously have a kind of the presence, even today has a presence of the wild animals. So it seems that, such monuments were closed by the kind of the doors, mostly the wooden doors, and a kind of the cells and the benches. Yeah. So the very important is basically the new inscription. And this new inscription from Lohgad or Lohgad body had changed our earlier notions. Why earlier notions? Because even after the study of Pale inscription by these 2 great scholars, that is Professor Sankalia and Dr. Shobna Gokhale, many of the scholars were not agreed to accept Pale cave as a Jain cave. That is a reality, hardcore reality. And they have questioned because they thought that how in the cluster of such a Buddhist monastic architecture or such a Buddhist monastic establishment, how one Jain cave or Jain monastic architectures emerge and how it could be sustained for a long time. So in that context, very important to see basically the content of this Lohagadwadi inscription as deciphered by Dr. Sekant Pradhan, Dr. Abhinav Kurkute, and Mr. Vivek Kale. So again, the language is a Prakrut influenced by the Sanskrit, and here is the very famous inscription. And this finding of this Lohagadwadi inscription had changed our refresh, revise our earlier notions. And this is the structures constructed during the medieval time, because this was very important for during the medieval period, as all of us know. The details of the inscription, and this is the inscription. Photograph is by the Dr. Sekant Pradhan, courtesy of Archaeological Survey of India, and our friend Dr. Manish Rai help us, Dr. Pradhan sir and his team, basically to reach and to take the photograph and to study. So those who know the basics of the inscriptions, they can understand basically the paleography. The paleography is again the very close to the 2nd century BC, late 2nd century BC, or early 1st century BC. And it also mentions, and again, the start with the very venerable or sacred formula, that is a mantra, venerating the Arhantanam, and again mentions the Bhayanta Ida Rakshitena, that is a Bhadanta in the Rakshit. So this becomes the second archaeological evidence preserved in its original context, mentioning the name of very famous Jain Muni or saint, that is the Vedanta in the Rakshit. And the inscription mentions that is the path was constructed. So the Vedanta in the Rakshit, along with his colleagues, that is a Venerable Goshal and many others. What they did is basically do asana, that is the two asanas, that is the two benches, then podhi, then veika, which is still has not been found and needs to be further located in the entire cluster of Lohagadwadi. But veika is the word, Prakrut word, which we have it's a Sanskrit parallel, that is the Vedika, which means the railing. And then podhi, that is a very common word, that is used for the water system in many of the early Prakrut inscription. So it again mentions that Bhadanta in the Rakshita's contribution to disseminating Jainism in the basically the Western Deccan in general and the region of the Pune in particular. So when we look at the observations of the inscriptions, very important that probably it could be the very early inscription mentioning the donation of the pathway, that is the patho. That word is not much coming, many of the early Buddhist or early Jain inscription of other regions. Again, the mentioning of the donation of the two benches, that is also very do asana. That is again very important evidence mentioning that how the architecture terms, again, Jain monastic architecture terms, they are evolving and preserving in an archaeological context. And starting with the Mangalacharan, Namo Arhantanam, is basically the landmark in identification of these two inscriptions with Jainism, as this term has not been used in the other, basically the inscriptions or the text of the other religious traditions. That is very important. So the question is basically, who was the Venerable Indrarakshit? So the Venerable Indrarakshit or Indrarakshit must be a very important Jain saint, Jain Muni. It was a such time the land of Maharashtra, which was blessed with the natural landscape of the Sahyadris, and how the Shramanic religious movements were basically forwarding in this region. So in the late 3rd century before Common Era or early 2nd century before Common Era, as I mentioned earlier, the Shamanic religious movements were getting established in the Western Deccan. In such context, he was such a Jain religious teacher who was credited for the establishment of Jain monastic centers at two places, that is the Pale and Lohgad or Lohagadwadi. which are the two earliest Jain settlements or the Jain monastic establishments in the Deccan, which have been further attested by the epigraphical evidence, or that is their paleography. As I told that there are more than 20 to 25 Jain caves at Lohogadwadi. Many of them are not accessible. The eastern group has been come into the light because of the finding of this inscription, although not in a good state of preservation. Also, we have the mention of the Gosala. It means that probably Venerable Indra Rakshit, the Muni Indra Rakshit must have been, working for the propagation of the Jainism along with his associates or along with his fellow monks, and the name of one such a fellow or the monk, that is a Gosal, is mentioned here. When the early religious architecture of the Western Deccan or the Maharashtra has been studied, so there were various issues, and that is why I have mentioned from Pale to Dharashu, that is earlier known as Osmanabad, and at Dharashu there is also very famous Jain caves excavated between the late 4th to early 6th century CE, and the issues regarding the affiliation of the Dharashu caves has been questioned by many scholars, and still many scholars consider them as a Buddhist caves, or like especially the main caves were earlier Buddhist and later got converted into Jainism, whereas the scholars such as the Professor G.V. Mirashi, another scholar, Professor Hiralal Jain, they have basically on the basis of some texts like a Karakanda Chariyo have firmly established that the monastic establishment at Dharashu was a Jain establishment since its foundation. So it seemed that basically there was a hiatus, but it was not a kind of the hiatus, as there are the many such single caves are located in this Maharashtra, and we do not, frankly speaking or honestly speaking, many times we do not have their religious affiliation because of the absence of such a substantial evidence. So the Pale and Jain caves make us to basically rethink regarding such a caves, whose religious affiliation has not been firmly established as such. And also the Lohogadwadi caves emerge as basically to provide a very important set to understand the study of Jain monastic architecture and compare it with the other regions like Gujarat, where we have the cluster of Jain caves, also in Andhra Pradesh, where we have the Jain caves, then Madhya Pradesh, Odisha. So such regions where we have the Jain caves. So probably how the early Jain rock cut architecture or the monastic architecture, basically the flourish or the formulated and later on the flourish. So in that case, the Lohogadwadi provides very important evidence. As I mentioned that the terms like a Podhi and the Vehika, Asana are very important, and they makes us to basically help us to reinvestigate that to comprehend the Jain monastic architecture. And it seems that probably after Pale could be the Pale and the Lohogadwadi, the Pale could be the first activities, which was initiated by the Venerable in the Rakshit, and later on from the Pale, it seemed that, how the Jain caves or the cluster of the Jainism, was propagated. So the Lohogadwadi, which is a large group, must be required, kind of the patronage, many supporting systems, many helping hands. And as we know that all these sites are located in ancient trade routes, we know that the very important contribution of the Jains in basically the trade and merchants in the time of the 5th, 6th century BC, as mentioned in Buddhist and the Jain texts, and along such basically the trade centers, the cities or the merchants, we have the different sartavas, we have the different terms, in the basically the canonical literatures, of Jainism as well as Buddhism. So they played very important role in basically establishing the Lohogadwadi. And as I told that, what statement made by Professor Sankalia and Gokhale jointly in their article in 1971 that there must be the presence of many more Jain caves. The finding of Lohogadwadi inscription and many clusters, as much as we know about the 5 clusters or the 5 groups, the statement made by Professor Sankalia and Dr. Shobna Gokhale has been made true or has been basically converted as a kind of the reality. And also, still there are many more caves like Uksan, Kamre, which are not very close affinity with the Buddhist architecture. And Dr. M.N. Deshpande, a very well-known authority on Jain architecture or the rock cut architecture, used to say that, for some of the basically the vows or some of the vratas of Jain Munis, probably they needs a kind of such a close space, So probably in that context also there is a need to basically study the Pale and Lohogat caves and also carry out the exploration. So thank you. I express my sincere thanks to my institute, Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute, for giving such opportunities and freedom for research. Also thank to Archaeological Survey of India, Dr. Manish Rai, Dr. Sikant Pradhan, who was mainly associated with the research of basically the Lohogadwadi inscription, Mr. Vivek Kare, who has been along with his many friends like Abhinav, Kurkute, Sai Prakash, Ninath, Amay, and Ajay. They were every weekend they are going and basically carrying out exploration of this Himawal region, and they reported many of the new caves, and in one of such their exploration resulted into the finding of a Jain inscription, which changed, entire our earlier, you can say, the notions. I express my sincere thanks to the Sabri sir and Dr. Jain madam for giving this opportunity to share my thought. Thank you very much. Questions are welcome.
Or if you want to collaborate or correlate some other examples, yeah. So, आणि मुघलवाडी उदयवाडी आणि
कुठली साईट सर?
उदयवाडी म्हणजे खंडाळा पुणेवाडीवरून डायरेक्टली उदयवाडी जवळजवळ 4-5 किलोमीटर गाडीचा पैसा त्याच्यावरती मी आठवलं मला कार्य वगैरे मी पाहिलेले आणि दोन्ही केलेले ते नाव
भयंत इदरक्षित बसला
कांबरे
हो, कांबळे उपसन पाले कांबळे वर गेले की उपसन हो हो बरोबर अंदर मावळ हा पवन मावळ उन्हाने मावळ करेक्ट हो हो तिकोणाला पण किंवा येस आहे त्या परिसरात खूप केव्ज आहेत लहान लहान इतक्या लेण्या आहेत तो परिसर पूर्ण
त्यासाठी ते बांधलेलं आहे तर अजूनही तिकडून गाढवं घोडे बैल अजून त्या पायऱ्यावर एवढं सगळी जे रांजण आहे तिथपर्यंत आता थोडंसं
नाही तुमच्याकडून माहिती घेऊ आणि त्या लेणींना पण भेट देऊ आणि फार महत्वाची माहिती सांगितली धन्यवाद Yes. That Goa cave, na? Yeah. So actually, that is also very. In general, we do not have the presence of the early Buddhist, remains in Jainism, but that cave seems to be at prima facie some association with Buddhism. But sometimes what happen, as I have not visited, so probably when I will visit, sometimes what happens at a first sight, we think that probably the monuments, sometimes, and especially the Govan caves, they are in laterite, So in the laterite, many of the architecture features, they are not very preserved for a long time, Laterite is a such kind of the different kind of the, the rock, So in that case, probably we have, although it looks like a kind of stupa structure, but needs to be, personally visited. And sometimes, after visit, maybe the what early observation we made, sometimes it get changed. It is like, archaeologists are always, ready for this. How to be ready for that? Yeah. Yeah, that is a very good question, but tricky question. And technically speaking, it is like for doctor, when you have the temperature, he says that you have temperature. That is a fever, jwar. What we have the word, But again, there are the many jwaras, shita jwara, malaria, and some again many kind of the fevers, So unless and until we don't go the kind of the very clinical diagnosis, very difficult for the doctor. So same like archaeologists also same time, if there is no kind of the substantial evidence, the pillars are not there, they are just a small cells, no any kind of the inscription or their motif. I'm talking about the motif of the contemporary time period. I'm not talking about the intrusive motifs as such, So if all such a set of evidence is missing, then it becomes very difficult. So that is why I told that why the Pali inscription and the Lohagarhwadi inscription have changed our earlier notion, Yeah. And many scholars till the Lohagarhwadi, even today in personal communication, they don't agree that those are Jain caves. I don't want to take their name. I already told that, But in a personal say that no, Are Srikant, Amala Vatat nahi tya Jain asti. So that quote unquote. So, but it's thing that, if that is a condition, so even many of the caves, we just try to associate with Buddhism if they're on the trade routes, but probably for a student of archaeology like us, for like me, the substantial evidence is very, important. Otherwise, we can say we can also we can make a very like a fever, what doctor says, we can say that those are early caves, But as far as their religious affiliation or the sectarian affiliation comes, the substantial archaeological evidence is must. आता पालेला इन्स्क्रिप्शन आहे नमो अनंतानम आहे संपलं झालं लोहगडवाडीला आहे नमो अनंतानम हा 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 फक्त आपण त्यांना असं म्हणू शकतो तिथे पिलर्स असतील तर याचा कालखंड हा आहे या कालखंडातील ह्या लेणी आहेत फार सेफली सांगावं लागतं ना डॉक्टरलाही माहित असतं आपल्याला कुठला ताप झाला पण तो पण सगळ्या इन्व्हेस्टिगेशनच्या थ्रू जाऊ देतो आपल्याला लक्षात ठेवा हा बिकॉज फायनली हॅज टू कन्फर्म दॅट तसा हा एक सांगते तर तसं आता एक पेन जवळ एक धबधब्यात एक लेणी आहे ती अशीच फार मिस्ट्री म्हणून आहे अनेक जण तिला स्पेसिफिक आहे असं सांगत आहे 2 पिलर्स आहेत ते पिलर्स अनेक लेण्यात मिळतात कारण की प्लॅन हा एखाद्या रिलिजियस स्ट्रक्चर सोबत तुम्ही जोडू शकता पण व्हेरी जर एखादा पिलर आहे एखादा जस्ट सॉकेट आहे हे जे मोनास्टिक किंवा एक जस्ट आर्किटेक्चर मोनास्टिक शब्द पण फार झाला या आर्किटेक्चर जे हे आहेत एलिमेंट्स आहेत यांना असं स्पेसिफिकली रिलिजियस याच्यामध्ये बसवणं फार अवघड आहे अनलेस अँड अनटिल तिथे काहीतरी मोटिव्स आहेत काही सायन्स आहेत सिम्बॉल्स आहेत काहीतरी इमेजरी आहे काहीतरी असं आहे की जेव्हा आपण त्याच्याने आपण त्यांना एक स्पेसिफिक टाइम पिरियड मध्ये नेऊ शकतो पण जसं म्हटलं तर आता सिम्बॉल्स असतील किंवा मग आयकॉन्स असतील धाराशिवचं तुम्हाला मी सांगितलं आता प्राध्यापक ढवळीकर सरांनी लेख लिहिलेला आणि त्यांनी विदर्भ संशोधन मंडळामध्ये लेख लिहिलेला हा 1970 मध्ये प्रकाशित झाला 1970 मध्ये की ह्या ज्या जैन ह्या ज्या धाराशिवची लेणी आहे ही बौद्ध लेणी आहे त्याच्यानंतर 2 त्याच्यावर उत्तर आले पहिलं उत्तर प्राध्यापक डॉक्टर वावी मिराशी जे फार प्राचीन भारतीय इतिहासाचे आणि शिलालेख आणि नाणकशास्त्राचे फार मोठे आंतरराष्ट्रीय तज्ज्ञ होते त्याने ती जैन आहे सादर सिद्ध केलं मग दुसरेच अभ्यासक मी सांगितलं प्राध्यापक जैन हिरालाल जैन जे फार होते त्यांनी पण तिथे म्हणजे जैन प्रतिमा असताना फक्त त्याचा जो प्लॅन आहे तो अजिंठा लेणी क्रमांक 1, 2 ह्या ज्या काही महान कालखंडातील लेण्या आहेत याच्याशी बऱ्यापैकी साधर्म्य असल्यामुळे ह्या केव्ज मूळ बौद्ध होत्या मग जैन झाल्यात किंवा ही पर्टिक्युलर आणि आतमध्ये पुन्हा जैन इमेजेस पण आहेत शाईनमध्ये एवढं असूनही त्याच्या याच्याबद्दल म्हणजे प्रश्नचिन्ह म्हणजे बरेचदा असं होतं त्यामुळे जोपर्यंत पूर्ण एव्हिडन्स पुरावा क्लिअर नसतो बरेचदा सांगणं अवघड होतं प्रामाणिकपणे सांगायचं झालं तर लोक त्याला कुठल्या ना कुठल्या संप्रदायाशी धर्माशी जोडतात आणि एकदा का त्या गोष्टी तशा जोडल्या की मग त्याच्यावर आम्हाला शांतता राहावं शांत किंवा संयम ठेवावा लागतो तेच मला वाटते तेच एक योग्य असतं परंतु पुरातत्वीय दृष्ट्या त्यांना तसं सिद्ध करणं थोडंसं अवघड आहे जर तिथे कुठला पुरावा नसेल तर थँक्यू
Thank you, sir, for very informative and very detailed and with support and evidences. Sir has explained what is the Jainism and what are the Jain caves in Maharashtra. After that, Dr. Ganvir sir, please come. Yes, please. So I request our Neelam Jain ma'am, as a token of love, we will felicitate Dr. Shrikant Ganvir sir. Yes, Dr. Neelam Jain ma'am, he is a feliciting to Dr. Shrikant Ganvir. So thank you, Ganvir sir. Next the speaker, our Shri Gopal Joge, and Gopal Joge sir is delivering his expert lecture on Jain caves of Maharashtra. Friend, Dr. Gopal Joge joined this institute 14 years back. Earlier, he was worked as a lecturer in one of the college in Marathwada region, and right from the beginning, he is connected with the study of the art and architect and these studies of the Buddhist and Jain kind of architect. So he is here. So he is going to deliver this lecture on his expert topic. So I request Gopal Joge sir to start his lecture. Yes, please. Foundation. So, Dr. Neelam Jain ma'am is giving a lesson of law to our manager. So, this includes representation as well as the Another thing is what? Today, on the occasion of this one-day workshop, creation foundation, they have visited our vice chancellor, co-vice chancellor, as well as the speaker of this workshop, but on the behalf of our institute, Jain College University, we have not celebrated him, the three emotions of the first thing, foundation. So, on the behalf of Jain College, now we are celebrating by giving a token of love, that is the Jain College mark. Okay, so that is very small, I think, gift. So, I hope there will take that we are following there is a from the quality that is a difficult for our monument is I will go Dr. Manager to give this to our first of all Dr. Neelam Jain ma'am. Yes. For our Mamta Jain ma'am. Yes. Actually, then, with our executive students, and we are very happy that we are very young and energetic into working throughout the India as far as the reason and the service concerned. So I will give this token of love to. सबके बारे में बताया जैसे सर के बारे में बताया जैसे ममता जैन मैम शी इज द वर्किंग एज एडिटर ऑफ कृष्णा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इन पुणे मैडम के बारे में तो मैंने बताया ही है शी इज अ विजिटिंग स्कॉलर इन यूएसए एंड शी इज अ वर्किंग एज ए टीचर आंसर स्कॉलर एंड शी इज नॉट अ वर्ड इन ट्रेनिंग सो थैंक यू ऑल for collaborating with Jain College for this workshop, and we hope in future also we will do so many things. So I request Gopal Joge sir. Yeah. Gopal Joge sir, please start.
Good evening to everybody. Am I audible? If not, kindly tell. It's been always honor to be speak on Jain tradition. First, I would like to thanks to the organizer of this workshop. That's why I'm asking to everybody. Hello? Hello? Is it audible now? Audible? Yes. So now it's almost evening. The audience must have been mesmerized listening the scholarly talks on the various aspects of the Jainism. Before me, Dr. Srikant Garvi, my colleague, have speak on the Jain rock cut caves of Maharashtra. The topic that is assigned to me is of the Jain heritage of Maharashtra region. It's a very general topic and having a very wider aspect. In this talk, I will be going to cover a few of the points of the Jain heritage and culture of Maharashtra region. In general, we are mostly familiar with the tangible Jain heritage, includes such as the sculptures, temples, rock cut caves, because these are massive and those can be visible. And nowadays, these types of the heritage are glorified on various platforms, especially on social media. But there are many more things apart from all these kinds of the tangible heritage. Nowadays, the term heritage, we are using very loosely. Loosely in the sense that it is mostly glorified in context to the affiliation of that particular heritage to the religion, caste, and community. In a way, in the modern world, especially after the rise of the social media, the term heritage became a part of the contemporary politics and political mobilization. So hence, it's a duty of the scholar that how we are defining the idea of the heritage without its fanatic affiliation to the any kind of the religion and its community association. Heritage is of the for all humanity. That's defined by the UNESCO. So hence, every heritage aspect has to be seen in this way. In that sense, when we come to the Jain heritage of the Maharashtra, that has been widely spread. And if you come on to the details of these Jain heritage, then we'll have to be look at how the Jain tradition was groomed in this region, in larger sense in Deccan and South India. When it was been crossed from the Indian region and the Jain tradition was introduced in this area. It must have been pointed out by Ganvir sir that how archaeological evidence suggests that the Jain religion or the Jain faith was introduced around 2nd century BCE or 1st century BCE. As we came to know through the discovery of the early Jain inscription at Lohgadwadi, and before that it was at Pale. But initially it was very controversial, but now there is some clarity that the inscriptions found at these places most probably belongs to the Jain tradition due to the very initial term that has been appeared as Namo Arihantanam. And it has been accepted that the term Arihantanam widely used in Jain tradition. Apart from this, we have a number of myths and legends. Those also suggest that how in early centuries of before the Common Era, Jainism might have been introduced in this region. Now, It's very complex scenario when we look to the early centuries before the Common Era, when all these newly emerging faith and beliefs were spreading together in the South Asia. Jainism was spreading along with the Buddhism, as well as it was existing when the local faith and belief was there. And also it was existing along with the Vedic tradition and later on the Brahmanical and the Puranic tradition. And this presence of the Jainism makes the sense that in what condition, in what circumstances, the Jainism have survived and the Jainism have tried to left their the archaeological reminiscences. We observe that the rapid spread and the popularity of the Jainism was increased after the 5th, 6th century CE. We can have evidence that when the Kadambas of the Vanvasi was ruling in the north of Karnataka region, and it was in this period we have the earliest evidence of the formation of the Yapaniya sect, one of the important sect of the Digambar tradition. Further that this Yapaniya sect was the most popular sect in the South Indian Jain tradition and Deccan also. Then we have the clear evidence that how the Chalukyas of Badami perhaps was patronized the Jain tradition, and it was during this period we could see the geographical extent of the Jainism in the Deccan region. It was in this period in Chalukyas of Badami we have the early architectural examples of the Jain tradition. We have the early examples of the Jain iconography as well as the other aspects. And it was in this period Jainism had begun to go close to the contemporary society. And that closeness of the Jainism can be defined and can be understood based on to the languages that has been used by the Jain scholars and the Jain acharyas, especially the all early literature of the Deccan languages were produced by the Jain scholars, whether it is of the Kannada, whether it is of Apabhranshi, whether it is of the Marathi, whether it is of the Gujarati, and so forth, even Tamil also. It was these Jain monks and the Jain scholars who had utilized the local language, vernacular languages, and had begun to popularize the Jain tradition in this region. It means that the society of that contemporary period probably was well acquainted with the Jain tradition, and they were known to the Jain tradition. They might were known to the core principles of the Jain religion, and that is there, Satya, Ahimsa, Astya, Aparigraha, and the Brahmacharya. These were the 5 Maha Anuvratas based on that Jainism was stand. And around that, the principle of the non-violence was the backbone of the Jain idea. And we can see. Further that, we could see that gradually Jainism had occupied the very prominent position when the Rashtrakutas of the Manyakhet were emerged. It was during the period of the Rashtrakutas, the most of the Jain caves were excavated in the present extent of the Maharashtra region. It was during this period the most of the Jain literature were produced. It was in this period the most of the Jain monasteries were seen existing into the Maharashtra region, and it was maybe continuing. Even we could have the clear evidence that how some of the Rashtrakuta king or the monarchs were the staunch follower of the Jainism and along with the Jain austerities. Apart from it, when we come to the late phase of the early medieval period, onwards 10th century CE, when the Rashtrakutas were fell down, then we have the rise of the local, the feudal dynasties. Those were initially the feudatories of the Rashtrakutas, and later on, after the fall of the Rashtrakutas, they were emerged independently. We could see the western coast were occupied by the Shilaharas. The middle of Maharashtra was seen occupied by the Yadavas of Devagiri, and the south of the Maharashtra was seen covered by the Chalukyas of Kalyani. These were the dynastic setting in between 10th to 12th century CE. And it was in this period also the new movement in Jainism was formed, and that new movement was in the form of the building of the structural temples. Most of the structural temples of the Maharashtra region was built during these centuries, and those were seen in the entire pan-Maharashtra region. At least we have the archaeological evidence which suggests that beginning from the 11th century CE onwards to the 14th, 15th century CE, there was the continuity of the construction of the structural temples in Maharashtra region. And these temples were seen patronized by the local rulers, the dynasties and the merchants and the ladies. Okay? So these kinds of the diverse phenomena we could see. These historical settings of the Maharashtra were tried to studied by the several scholars. I am not the first person who is talking on it, but there are so many stalwarts who did have done excellent work to explore and define the position of the Jainism in Maharashtra region. I would like to take the name of the Gawat Tagare, who did have done a very excellent work on the Maharashtra Jainism. I would like also take a name of the Sudhakar Kopkar, who had worked on the Jain literature of the Maharashtra region. I would like to take a name of the Viraj Shah, who have done a very excellent work on the Jain rocket caves of the Maharashtra region. Unfortunately, there is no as such comprehensive work on the Jain structural temple of the Maharashtra region. We do not have the how many number of the temples, structural temples of Jain tradition are existing in Maharashtra region. We need to take a project on it to document all these temples and to give a specific number that how many Jain temples were there in early medieval Maharashtra. There is also another phenomena we do observe in this century, especially in 10th to 13th century CE, when the Jain temples were built in Maharashtra region. When we go on the field, most of the time, we do find that the Jain temples were massively destroyed. So this is one very significant archaeological phenomena we can come across when we go on field. We need to examine why these destruction were made, apart from fanatic religious interpretation. Okay. Now here I have planned to discuss the heritage of Maharashtra with these bullets. We need to take care of the literary heritage of the Jainism in Maharashtra region, in which we'll have to we take care of the how Maharashtra Prakrut, Apabhransh and the Marathi literature was produced from the Jain tradition. What kind of the genre were used by the Jain authors and scholars also has to be part of our observation, because it is one of the important legacy, cultural legacy of the Deccan region. When we go through the early literature of the Marathi language, then everybody should have to take a note of the how Jain literature had given a new sights and new insight to produce the various types of the literature. Okay? Then in art heritage, there are many more that we should have to be look carefully. Stone sculptures are there, Jain bronzes are there, decorative art are there, early medieval cave paintings are there, which is most neglected part of the studies in general, cave painting history of the Maharashtra region. The late medieval wall paintings, a very important part of the cultural history of the Maharashtra region, especially when it comes to the understanding of the Jain cultural tradition. Late medieval miniature paintings, which are there found in the manuscripts and in general independent miniature paintings of the Jain tradition, and the late medieval manuscript painting, which is valuable wealth to understand the cultural history of the Jainism as well as the cultural history of the Deccan and Maharashtra. Then apart from this, then Jain architecture, rocket caves and structural temples are there, and the Jain inscription. The Jain inscriptions are a very valuable data. Okay? Not only data, it also a valuable heritage. Okay? These Jain inscriptions are seen scattered in entire Maharashtra region. Okay? Everywhere you could see that how Jain inscriptions are there, especially the followers of the Jainism were always conscious to left their mark to the inscription label. Okay? Most of the Jain images bears the inscription, most of the Jain monuments bear the inscription, and those are very valuable data to understand the diverse tradition of the Jain culture which were existing in early medieval Maharashtra region. Okay? So we need to take care of. Okay? I think most of the previous scholar must have discussed so many aspects of the Jainism. I think it's my just a personal perception that how the various principles need to be keep in mind when we deal with the Jain tradition. So I would like to express that everybody should have to keep in mind that to understand the Jainism is that to understand the genesis and formation of the Indian art and architecture, the study and observation of Jain art and architecture is most crucial part. Okay? Whenever we discuss the origin of the Indian art, especially the historical art, I think very few scholars given attention to the Jain art. Most of the discourse either are leaning towards the Buddhist tradition or we're seeing leaning towards the Hindu tradition or Brahmanical tradition. Very few scholars have taken a note of the contribution of the Jainism in the origin of the Indian art. In a way, the decorative motifs, symbols were introduced by the Jain traditions were very interactive to the early formation of the Indian art tradition. So hence, as Ganimir sir have pointed out, there is need to keep always consciousness to making the religious appellation of any kind of the archaeological findings, if it does not have in proper context. In that sense, when the early art objects were discovered in colonial period, at that time we observed that the number of mistakes were happened. In those mistakes, in general, most of the Jain material were seen affiliated to the Buddhist tradition, which are now being tried to make out, and people are working on it to specify the wrong identifications were happened in those early periods. Now we are having a good amount of the information. Now we are having the number of translated text of the Jain tradition, and we are more mature now to deal with the art object, how to identify it. So hence, whenever we deal with any specimen, at that time, this consciousness has to be there in our mind before the making its religious affiliation. Next is Jain visual traditions always observed was honest to its philosophical traits. In Indian religious tradition, it is Jain tradition which does not make any compromise to its religious ideas. In a way, the Jain principles and ideas were formed in early formation period, were seen continue to express through its art. So hence, the Jain heritage also has to be taken in that context. How the humanitarian values were tried to bring forth to the various Jain visual concepts. So hence, when we interpret the Jain art, there has to be an understanding of the Jain philosophy. Otherwise, there is no need. Okay? Otherwise, we would go with the wrong direction to correlate with the other contemporary religion, which generally happens. Okay? If you could go through the various books written on the Jain art, most of the time, Jain arts were tried to interpret based on the existing established religious tradition. Either it goes to the interpretation with the Brahmanical tradition or it goes to the Buddhist tradition. There is an independent philosophical existence of the Jain. So hence, this principle is the most important principle when we deal with the Jain heritage. Okay? Otherwise, we will go with the wrong direction. Okay? Third is that from its beginning, Jain art was very innovative. In Indian art tradition, Jain art have introduced so many innovative concepts, which were seen later adopted by the other faiths, which has to be part of our discussion always, that how the innovative visual concepts were introduced by the Jain tradition, how it has been adopted by the others and has been praised. Obviously, it was a part of the development of the art tradition, but when we look to the early historical communication through the art and the architecture, then this point also has to be important when we deal with the Jain heritage. Then the image worship in Jain tradition developed through the idea of Jivanta Swami, not as a divine being. As we know that the images of the Tirthankara, they were not supernatural beings. They are normal human beings. They are Kevalin. They have attained the Keval Dhyan. They have attained the liberation. So hence, they are normal human beings. They are not possessing any kind of the supernatural powers. So hence, to avoid this divine concept, always the Jain Tirthankar images or the other important personalities of the Jain traditions were seen with this concept. So obviously, our observation should have to be go through all this line, that how based on this concept, the other Jain pantheons were structured and maintained, okay? Whether it is of Digambara tradition or the Shvetambara tradition or any. Throughout the period, the idea of the Tirthankara kept away from any kinds of the supernatural features that is there. Okay? And last one, it also observed that the Jain visual tradition was adaptive to accept the popular visual concepts. Okay? These can be seen in various types of the generic symbols and motifs, like swastik is there, elephant is there, but it is based on the Jain philosophy. Okay? These adoptions of the popular motifs and symbols in Jain tradition was based on the philosophical traits of the Jainism. And we need to interpret those symbols and motifs in this context. Okay? Otherwise, it would also go in the wrong direction. So these are the fundamental principles which has to be a part of the scholars' observations also, and anybody who is beginning in the studies of the Jain art, architecture, or Jain heritage studies. Okay? Because most of the time we go in the popular perception, and popular perception forms to the established studies. Okay? So this is just a picture of the Pale inscriptions, which was discovered long back by the late Professor Sankilia and the late Professor Shobna Gokhale. Okay? And they were the one who actually have left the baton to discuss that how Jainism was existing in the early centuries before the Common Era. This is recently discovered inscription at Logadwadi. It was discovered by our colleague Dr. Srikant Pradhan and other authors, and they had interpreted this inscription. Most interesting part of this inscription is that in both these inscriptions, we do come across with the common name, that is Indrabhuti. Okay? And this Indrabhuti was seen at Pale inscription also, and the same Indrabhuti also was seen in the Logadwadi inscription also, was a part of the donation given for the water system. Okay, now I will come on my favorite aspect of the Jainism in Maharashtra region is the Jain literary heritage of the Maharashtra. Okay? Apart from its material evidence. Okay? It was the Jain monks, Jain acharyas, and the Jain munis actually were responsible for the nourishing the Marathi language. Even in some extent, we could credit that what kind of the Marathi we do see in the ancient Maharashtra region, most of the credit goes to the Jain scholars. And among which, one of the earliest author of the Marathi language, we could say, as said by the Gava Tagare, was the Pushpadanta. The period of the Pushpadanta is 10th century CE, and he has written the Mahapuran, okay? Naya Punacharyu and Jashoharacharyu. Okay? These are the three literary treatises were produced by the poet Pushpadanta. Pushpadanta might was the contemporary to the last Rashtrakuta ruler Amogh Varsh. Okay? And it was in this period when Apabhranshi was departing towards the Marathi language. Okay? And hence, it was discussed by the Tagare that it was the earliest text of the Marathi language produced by the Pushpadanta. Then next poet is the Sripati. Okay? Sripati was the grand son of the Pushpadanta. Okay? And he had written Jyotish Ratnamala, a very important text. Okay? And today also, in general, the Marathi scholarship believe that it is one of the earliest Marathi texts, Jyotish Ratnamala. Okay? And there is a great contribution in the field of the astrology by the Jain scholar, and which the name of the Sripati always has to be taken very proudly. Okay? Even we could say that the Jyotish Ratnamala was such a popular text that during the early medieval period, it was accepted in all over the Deccan region. Okay? And even the influence of the Jyotish Ratnamala were seen over the text of the Gujarati region and over the text of the Madhya Pradesh and the other region. Okay? Then we have the Padma Purana of the Gunakirti, which is the Apabhranshi text. Okay? Then Shranika Charit is there of Janardhan. Okay? Then Jashodhara Ras of the Meghraj. Okay? Then Kanaka Kamara by the Karakanda Charyu. Then Dhanapala's Bhavishyat Kaha, and the Join Dev's Paramat Prakasha and the Yogasar. Okay? These are just few examples I have cited here. There are many more. Okay? If you can go with the book of the Sudhakar Kokkad, he rightly pointed out that beginning from the 10th century CE until to the 18th, 19th century CE, there was the continuous writing of Marathi text in Jain tradition. Okay? And it's a very valuable source to understand the development of the Marathi language and the spread of the Marathi language in Deccan region. It's just in general, and it's also a part of the Jain heritage. It should have to be taken care of. It should have to be studied, because we need to nurture all these languages, especially the Upper-Branchi language, Maharashtra Prakrut, the Prakrut, which was a part of the origin of all these vernacular languages. Okay? Now I will come on the Jain structural art of Maharashtra. It's one of the fascinating heritage of the Maharashtra region. We could see that when the early Jainism was introduced, probably it was the Digambar sect, and we could see the affiliation to the Yapaniya order of the Digambar sect in the Deccan region, and through which might be all this sculptural art or the visible art was produced. Okay? So in that sense, this is one example of the Tirthankar Trayi at Mangi Tungi, Maharashtra region. You can see the image of the Adinath, the first Tirthankar, flanked by the other two Tirthankars. One of the greatest heritage, sculptural heritage of the Maharashtra region we have at Ellora. This is the image of the goddess Ambika in the cave Indra Sabha. Okay? We are familiar that at Ellora, from cave number 30 to 35 is of the Jain caves, and these Jain caves gives the fair idea that what kind of the Jainism was there in Maharashtra region when the Rashtrakutas were ruling in most of the part of the Deccan. Okay? These caves are a part of the rock cut excavation when the Amogh Varsha came on a Rashtrakuta throne, and the most of the caves were seen excavated after the Amogh Varsha. Okay? And in which this image of the Ambika is acclaimed by the most of the art historians. Okay? If you could look at her stance of the sitting and the other background that is portrayed along with the Ambika is the most interesting one. Okay? I would not go into the detail of it, but if you can observe in general appearance of the goddess Ambika, you yourself can realize it, that how valuable this Jain heritage is. Okay? So this is another image of the Ambika at the same place, the Akshini Ambika. And just one comment on it. When we look to the early medieval Jain heritage of the Maharashtra, and especially of the Jain sculptural heritage, we will have to be look that how Ambika is occupying the major sectarian space in Jain tradition. Probably the goddess Ambika was the most popular goddess among the Jain followers of the Maharashtra region. That's why she is everywhere. That's why she is occupying the very important position in every rock cut caves and as well as the Jain structural temples. She is there always. Okay? So Ellora is the beginning point of it, how she is having the prominent position. Okay? The Yaksha Matanga can be seen. He is among the one Yaksha in all the Jain Yaksha figure who is having the popular position in the Jain sculptural art, and that also we could observe beginning from the Ellora. This is from the Ellora. Then the very fascinating narration of the Parshvanaths, the Susumar Giri's attack over the Parshvanath when he was in penance was a popular theme in the sculptural art of the Maharashtra region. The origin of it we could see from the Karnataka region, and later on when the Rashtrakutas came into power, this particular episode of the Parshvanath was seen everywhere. Okay? The Parshvanath always seen opposite by the Bahubali, okay? Especially in the rock cut caves of the Maharashtra. It's very meaningful. Okay? The kind of the Jainism and the Jain beliefs were there in the Maharashtra region or in the Deccan region. The symbolism that were formed through the depiction of the Parshvanath one side and the Bahubali is the most significant part of the Jain sculptural art of this region. Okay? In which you can see that how this particular image at Ellora provides us that what kind of the narrations were developed in this image. Okay? Next one is of the Bahubali. Okay? We could see that there was a cult of Bahubali in the Deccan region. One of the early structural representation of the Bahubali was seen at Badami. In cave number 4, we have the early representation of the Bahubali. Now, this emergence of the cult of Bahubali in Jain tradition perhaps was a parallel phenomena which was going through in the Deccan and South India, and that phenomena was the Bhakti. The cult of Bhakti, we could relate with the rise of the worship of the Bahubali in Jain tradition, because the Bahubali symbolized the dedication, the Bahubali symbolized the firmness, and the Bahubali symbolized the devotion. Devotion towards the attaining of the Keval Jnana, devotion towards the penance, devotion towards the austerity, and devotion towards the liberation from all kinds of the karmas. And we could see that these all ideas were visually symbolized through the image of the Bahubali. So hence, everywhere we do observe the presence of the Bahubali in the art of the Maharashtra region as well as the Deccan region. It was very popular cult. And in a way, the Bahubali was seen depicted is the most excellent. The detailing that were seen along with the Bahubali image, the participatory imageries were seen with the Bahubali goes with the parallel with the contemporary literary narration of the Jain tradition. Interesting part. And I would suggest that it's a most valuable heritage of the Maharashtra tradition. The treatment that is given to the Bahubali is excellent. It has to be acknowledged properly. It has to be researched properly that why Bahubali was important, why Bahubali was taken a prominent position in contemporary Jain society. It has to be a part of the discussion. Apart from it, when we could go through the early medieval archaeological information and the data, we come across very interesting phenomena. We notice that the region of the Vidarbha and Marathwada lead into the producing the most of the Jain heritage and the Jain structures. In Vidarbha and Marathwada region, in this period, number of the Jain religious centers were emerged, such as Jintur is there in Parbhani district, Shirpur Jain is there in Buldhana district, and many more. These were the Jain centers where an important part of the Jain pilgrimage, which is there in Tirthakalpataru, ancient Jain Tirthakalpataru, which might was existing in those periods. The place in Uspana district also was one of the Jain Tirthas. And all these Tirthas were woven into the textual tradition. That's why I told that the textual heritage are very important, which gives the very valuable information that how and when the Tirtha Kshetras of the Jain traditions were emerged, and what was their speciality, why those Tirtha Kshetras were formed in those localities. In that sense, it is noticed that after 11th, 12th century CE, it was the region of the Vidarbha and the Marathwada where the most of the Jain Tirtha Kshetras were formed. And even today also, most of the Jain temples were existing in this city, in which few examples I have mentioned in my presentation. This is one from the Digambar Jain Mandir at Borgaon Manju. It might was derived to the name of the Manjuna. And there, once upon a time, in the random digging, they had found the hoard of the Jain images, which is now enshrined into the late medieval temple. This is the late medieval structure having the board, and inside we have the images. And those are very valuable heritage to understand the spread of the Jainism in early medieval period. The image of the Rishabhnath and flanked by the other two Tirthankar. Borgaon Manju also is important place where the one of the earliest Jain bronzes were reported of the Maharashtra region. So that hoard also kept in the same temple, which goes around 10th, 11th century CE onwards. Same images. These are some images found at Borgaon Manju. Okay, now this is just a summary of what Ganvir sir have discussed, Jain rock cut caves. The Jain caves at Ellora, the Indra Sabha, a most beautiful rock cut excavation of Jain tradition at the Ellora cave complex. Especially this Sarvatabhadra shrine is the most fascinating part. Whoever is having interest in the Jain heritage especially architectural heritage, has to be observed this structure very carefully, that how it has been planned and how it has been executed. Especially the facade, backside facade of the same Sarodabhadra shrine also is interesting one to observe carefully. And the alongside wall having the some later Jain reliefs in the form of the a hero stone, also interesting one, how what kind of the movement was going at Ellora rock cut caves in the later period when these caves were excavated. Okay. In Jain art, especially in architecture, the idea of the Jain Manastamba also may have introduced when the Ellora rock cut caves were excavated. And one of its kind of the earliest example is there at the Ellora cave. And we could see a continuity of this same concept in the medieval and late medieval temples. This is one example where you can see four Tirthankar images at the top. So the front part of the Jain cave, Jagannath Sabha. Then the rock cut caves at Ankai Tankai is an important example of the post Rashtrakuta rock cut caves in Maharashtra region. Now, when we look to the rise of the Yadavas of Devgiri, which were claimed to be begin their political emergence from the area of the Sevunadesh, and probably the Sevunadesh was occupying the present area of the Nasik and the north of Maharashtra. Okay? And when we will look to the early rise of the Yadavas, in that context, the Ankai Tankai caves are very significant. And there is a legend that the very first king of the Yadava dynasty, Dridaprahar, as mentioned in the Jain legend, that was protected by the Chandraprabha. His mother had took the shelter in the temple of the Chandraprabha, and there the Dridaprahar was born, and was the founder of the Yadava dynasty. There is a close connection of the Yadavas to the early medieval Jain faiths that was there in Maharashtra region. Later on also, we have the fine example that the Yadava king Singan first also was the Jain follower. And further on, the Jain rulers might also was given the patronage to the Jain tradition. This interfaith linkage of the early medieval dynasty to the Jain tradition also is interesting part to understand the Jain legacy, Jain culture, and Jain heritages, how this kind of the communication was developing and what was the reason of the developing of these kinds of the cultural communication. In that sense, I do believe that the caves at the Ankai Tankai is the most significant architectural example. Has to be observed carefully. This is the facade of the cave. Okay, now here we can see same goddess Ambika. Now she is taken as the goddess, and she is living goddess worshipped by the local people, and which shows the adoption and appropriation of the Jain faith in contemporary society. At same, we have the image of the Yaksha Matanga also. Now these caves are taken care by the Archaeological Survey of India, and some of the part of the fort was taken care of the state archaeology. We don't go into detail, but they are the custodian of the heritage. Okay, now during early medieval period, we have a number of example of the Jain Basadi or the Jain temple, and there is a proper epigraphic reference and the literary reference that in this period the Kolhapur was emerged as one of the prime Jain center. It was the focal point of the Jain activity when the Shilaharas were raised. And it was at Kolhapur during this period most of the Jain temples were built. Alongside of the Kolhapur region, wherever there was a political spread of the Shilaharas of the Kolhapur, we do find a very strong presence of the Jain tradition. It is there in material culture also. It is there in contemporary social tradition also. If you look at the social organization of south of Maharashtra region, we do notice a very interesting phenomena how the various communities claim to be Jain. And there we have these kinds of the archaeological evidence. This is the Jain Basadi at Kolhapur. Now have been abandoned. there is of the image of the Tirthankaras over the Mandapa part and having the inscription on of the pilaster in Hade Kannada language. Then there is Adinath Basadi at Khidrapur, important place in the history of the Shilahara of the Kolhapur region. Khidrapur known for the Koppeshwar temple, but along with the Koppeshwar Shiva temple, there is of the Adinath temple. And you can see the temple of the Adinath along with the image of the Adinath Tirthankar, which is found recently. The exterior wall of this temple also decorated by the various types of the Jain Yaksha and Yakshini, especially those who are having the interest in the Jain sculptural heritage and the diversity of the Jain sculptural art. In that case, the example of the Adinath temple is the most important. And there are many more images which are not decoded properly. Then next we have the Zabareshwar temple at Paltan, district Satara, embellished with the wealth of the Jain sculptures. Various types of the Jain icons are there, and not only the Jain icons, but the Jain narrations are there. Invaluable example of the understanding of the Jain narrative art of the early medieval. Few of the examples. This is the Antariksha Parshvanath temple at Shirpur Jain. Disputed structure nowadays, but there is of the image of the Antariksha Parshvanath. This is the old photograph when it was taken by the Henrik Kajins, was in the exploration of the temples of the Maharashtra region. Valuable source to understand the structural features of the Jain temples. This is of the Nemagiri Kshetra at Jintur. Jintur is having the caves also and having the structural temples also. And then there is a good examples of the early medieval Jain paintings. The early examples are seen at Ellora and goes on continue until to the 17th, 18th century CE. These are some examples from Ellora caves. All of you are familiar, I believe. Okay, now I would like to point out the Keshriya Nath Jain temple at Jamod in Buldana district. The temple was built around 18th century CE, which once was studied by the Kamal Chauhan and the late Professor Mate. And this temple possesses the most insightful, interesting Jain wall paintings, which were thoroughly documented by the Mate and the Kamal Chauhan. And especially to understand the late medieval Jain narrative art, Jamod paintings are the beginning point for everybody. The temple, the entire interior of this temple is decorated. Just one example how the Jain narrations were seen, especially the birth of Tirthankar is shown and the installation of the Jain image also is shown. The relief of the Jain Tirthankaras along with the paintings. Jain narration at Jamod. Okay, so thank you. This is just a brief account of the various types of the Jain heritage, which gives us what kind of the Jainism was there in early medieval Maharashtra region. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, sir, for very wonderful lecture and very informative lecture. This is class. So, Dr. Vidam Jain Maharaj is presenting and thank you. And last one. It's not my particular very long lecture and all kind of this, but it is a part of this awareness. So because of the charges of the time, so I will want to show you on this two slides. That's all. Since morning, we have discussed on various aspects of Jain heritage. First of all,
What is the present condition?
Recording your हा तुम्हाला देशील आम्ही रेकॉर्ड केला कुठला लेक्चर रेकॉर्डिंग
अच्छा, ते आपण नाही करायचं, त्यांनी केलं.
तुम्ही कॉपी दिली
And what is it? How to recognize? So these either from these other things are Buddhist and Hindu and all kind of things. Then Dr. Sukant Gandhi, he focused on the Jain case of Maharashtra, then Gopal Gandhi sir, Gopal sir, he focused on their meditation. Different areas of the Maharashtra. Now here, when we have seen, since morning, we have seen what is the importance of the Jain heritage. The Jain was from inscription, the Jain was from art, architecture, and so many different type of symbols. And creativity is designed, right? So these heritages are how they are important, that already we have seen. So I am starting my lecture from this very important word, heritage. What is the heritage? Heritage is the gift of our forefathers. And this heritage, we can't miss, we can't deteriorate, or we can't damage. Because once they damage, we can't recover once again. That we need to keep in the mind. And therefore, friends, what kind of awareness is required and what is the present question of saying heritage? Of course, just like a very dangerous species, what are very dangerous species? You know, in case of body, some species are there, in case of animals, there are very dangerous species which are going to die or they are going to neglect. So, in the same way, in case of the Jain heritages, so these monuments are very rare, very few, and therefore, these monuments we need to conserve and preserve. That is our duty. But what happened? Already these monuments are very few, and we are not. Means what? How much monuments are conserving and preserving by Archaeology Survey of India? Very few. That already we have discussed. Sir has shown. Some other scholars they have shown, like Ajanta, Ellora, or some very important monuments only they have recorded and conserving and preserving. What about the other monuments? Most of the monuments they are under the custody of private, some organizations, some trust, where these are not doing the conservation and preservation properly. So that is the thing. If you are putting the oil paint, so it will definitely decrease the age of the monument very fast, tremendously. So because there is no chance for the respiration. If you are putting some ointment unnecessarily, that will also damage the age of this thing. आपने अगर उसको कंजर्व प्रिजर्व नहीं किया तो भी चलेगा, एज इट इज रखा तो भी चलेगा, लेकिन उसको अगर आपने कुछ कर दिया तो उसका और हालत खराब कर देगा. तो like this, there are so many important things which we need to keep in the mind. Natural, there are two types of heritage that already we know: movable, immovable, tangible, intangible, and natural heritage. So we are not talking about this. I am directly coming on what Jain architect. What is the importance of this heritage? So only technical point of view, I will just talk few words. So as far as the Jain temples are concerned, they found throughout the India, like Rajasthan, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. These are called as the most important areas. And there are so many important monuments like Mount Abu, like the Ajanta, some caves, already shown by these things, Sansi Stupa or some other monuments where they indicate what is their importance, what is their history, and what is their art and architect and everything. Now, what are the special features of these Jain monuments? Some Jain architect. Of course, this is very technical point of view I'm talking. So these architect, it is very, it looks like Buddhist architect. Our Ganvir sir already told that so many things are similar and therefore it is very difficult to separate out. And same like the Hindu caves also and the Buddhist caves. And in these two caves, how to identify and separate the Jain caves or Jain monument, that is a very difficult task without evidence. And therefore, the main distinction is that the Jains build temple cities rather than only Hindus temples, which are rule rather than the exception. And therefore, these temples are very luxurious. Jahan par temple hai, they are very big, they are very beautiful, and they are very large scale. और जहां पर नहीं है तो वहां पर कुछ दिखाई नहीं देता. And therefore, what is the importance of this thing? The temples are interior features like large number of columns, and from there the arch and the bracket springs around the 2/3 of its own dimension. Similarly, the pillars like roof from which they are derived are means what? Just like in a car, monolithic part. And the roof shapes such as which are found in the Mount Abu. If you see the Mount Abu area, so you will find that kind of roof. Means what? Typical roof which are carved in that particular thing only. So very beautiful carving design in case of each and every part of the temple, elements of the temple like their roof, their beams, columns, staircase, step, everything, they are constructed very well. And the domes or shikras are typically more sharper than those seen in the Hindu temple. That is another important. And giving Jain temple cities a distinctive skyline of many dome points arching into the sky. Means it is a pointing features. And all Jain temples are named after one of the 24 Tirthankaras. That is also very important thing to identify this thing. And bricks were rarely employed in the Jain buildings. And the practice of the cutting temples out of the rock faces was utilized. Means most of the temples are constructed by using building stone. You can see example given, this beautiful temple where there is no any use of the brick or mud or anything, but it is a totally used by this building stone and very intact, long span, sound construction and very well construction and very well designed. So that is the salient feature of all the architect of the Jain. And there are so many different types of Jain architect you can see in a Gumphas, caves, that is land statues or temples, or we can say the Jain architect you can see in the different caves like Yellora, Mangitungi, Gajpanta, Udaygiri, Kandgiri, and so many monuments are there. And the Tirthankaras are depicted in the form of statues in different kind of things. So here you can see the typical design of art and architect and architectural view, civil engineering construction style of these temples. You can see very beautiful carved rock in case of the Deccan land. Even though the basalt is very hard, the crushing strength of the basalt is 3 times greater than sandstone and 5 times greater than limestone, and it is greater than granite. Granite is having the crushing strength 18,000 to 2,000 kg per centimeter square, while the compact basalt is having the crushing strength 2,850 kg per centimeter square. It is a very tough and very rough rock. Once the rock is started to weather, it is 5 times greater than the granite, because it is made up of ferromagnesium mineral, which are very susceptible for the weathering condition. They are having very strong affinity towards the oxidation and hydration kind of reaction. And therefore, these felsic mafic minerals, they are very susceptible for this kind of thing. But the Jain monument, wherever they are carved, whether it is a Mangyutungi or the caves, different, the Ajanta caves, they are very beautiful. You can see the Gajpanta, these caves, you can see, they are not carved at the top, not at the foot hill. They are carved in a typical area where the rock is suitable. Means suitability of the rock also they know very well. So during the construction, and therefore the Udaygiri, you can say the monument is very intact. Today also you can see the 3 floor, these caves and all kind of things. And there are so many importance. Therefore, the art and architect and design and drawing and point of view, these monuments are very, very important in all respect. But now, whatever may be the picture shown by our different scholars, they have shown some sculpture, art and architect, inscription, everything. But what is the present condition of this thing? Because they were constructed, rock cut caves are constructed during 7th century, or some are in the 1st century, or some are in the latter. But what is the present condition? Whether we are conserving and preserving properly, whether we are putting our concentration towards the conservation? No. And how much monuments are protected by Archaeology Survey of India? Only 1 to 2%. And what about the other monuments? वो सब हवा में. So therefore, friend, already the Jain monuments are, they are very scarce, they are very rare, and they are endangered species like thing. And in that monuments also, there are so many monuments, they are unnecessarily, because of the negligence of our society, these monuments are damaging. And therefore, ma'am has given very important one suggestion, ki wherever you found any damaged temple, we will help. But ma'am, in case of the Jain temple also, Jain some heritage also, there we need to concentrate on that also, because the ma'am also, some speakers, they are also mentioned that the Jain community, they are having very good business and very good economic condition. But as far as these monuments, some monuments are very well preserved, no doubt about it. But in case of the some monuments, our main observation, this is not my observation, but very well-known scholar Arun Khanna is one of the scholar, and according to him, what he means, it is Jain heritage are very rich, and they are now found in what? Everywhere in the country, everywhere, in all parts of country. Of course, in Karnataka, Maharashtra, the concentration is more, but throughout India we are getting. But the Jain heritages in the state, they are neglected and ruins due to the central and state government agencies' attitude towards the rich archaeological heritage of India. So the Jain community did not take pride in the preservation of their heritage as a migration, and due to many social and religious unhealth, which led to the additions and alteration of the Jain heritage in the historical perspective that occurred in India from time to time. The lack of sense of pride of ownership for rich ancient heritage by community also responsible for the neglect, both public as well as by government agencies. And the lack of awareness of the rich cultural heritage by the community in a modern parlance itself also major cause of the distress conditions. See, this is throughout the India, this is the observation by this person. And another challenges is what? We need to create the ways for creating awareness, identification, protection, conservation, and preservation of Jain heritage found in archaeological evidences, which could have survived the ravages of the time and man from the further destruction in future. And due to unplanned, unvetted, and unwarranted urban growth of our country, the tangible or built heritages, which can be perceptible by the touch, for example, in all form building, would be saved. And the cultural heritage provides insights of the ancestor achievements like construction technology, techniques, art, architect, resources, and so many important things that we are going to miss according to the time. And due to the present day condition, due to urban development, rural development, tunnel, dam, bridges, dock, harbors, and agricultural development, so many monuments daily there are damages, and therefore, friend, I am bringing your concentration here, not only Jain heritages, but it is my personal experience. Wherever I am going in a Bhima Basin towards the Karnataka, I can say 10 to 15 monuments are become disappear. The JCP and Poclanes are the most dangerous enemy of these heritages. Within fraction of minutes, they can damage the monument, and the monuments has become means what? Disappear. So similarly, this is in case of the large scale monuments. But what about the Jain monuments? They are already rare, and therefore, friend, we need to go for that. But the most important steps taken by the government to conserve and preserve the Jain heritage, especially, I am bringing this thing in your concentration, that the identification of Jain heritage, both existing and ancient, require attention of stakeholders and central and state attention for the preservation and conservation of heritage. Government has taken some initiative after this Khanna's report. What kind of initiative they have taken? The government of India under the minority ministry, because this comes under minority ministry, these monuments are very rare, and the minority ministry must establish a national project on Jain heritage in consultation with the Department of Culture, with 50 crores of rupees for 5 years they should give, and for identification, documentation, and to carry out the conservation of the Jain heritage, line which is in desolate condition through the Archaeology Survey of India in various states. Documentation under the village to village foot survey for 4 stages of South India by Archaeology Survey of India could be carried under the central fund scheme through under the Archaeology Survey of India as a nodal agency of Government of India. Means detailed exploration we need to carry. Formulation of the project through IGNCA for documentation of the Jain antiquities, temples existing and ruined under the project funded by Department of Culture. And the 4th one condition they have put forward, that is special project assigned to various central universities in respective states to carry out the work of documentation on the pattern of Archaeology Survey of India under the Form D. So Form D is concerned with the conservation of the documentation and conservation of the monument. So, and the second last point is Ministry of Minority Affairs funded scheme under the Dharor through for documentation and identification of various Jain antiquities lying in different museums of both of central, state and private collection project would be funded through the National Antiquity Mission, which is located at Red Fort for the documentation purpose. And to provide the fund through the central government project to non-Jain NGOs to carry out the documentation of the Jain heritages in various states of India, so that whatever may be the private some monuments or whatever may the antiquities we can document and we can protect properly with the help of government fund. And the last thing is minority ministry under the Dharor scheme to provide the funds in a project to Jain Mahasabha to carry out the documentation and conservation work of Jain heritages by engaging trained archaeologists from the Institute of Archaeology students, as it has been already carrying conservation and preservation of the Jain temples in various parts of the India, which had been lying in a desolate condition since 8th to 9th century onwards. The project has been submitted to Minority Ministry for the approval. So these already submitted by some of the person who are concerned with the conservation and preservation in the Jain community. So thank you for your concentration, and these are the some of the points, remedial measures already suggested by some scholar that I have read with the help of this last slide. And thank you all for your concentration, and this followed by, I'll if you have any query, any problem, but these are my points of what the awareness and what is the present condition and what we need to do and what is the government role regarding this conservation that already we have discussed. So now I'll call upon the stage Akshay. Now I call upon the stage to Mr. Akshay Jain. Yeah, please come.
A very good afternoon, everyone. Respected Chief Guest, Professor Manager Singh, Vice Chancellor Sir, Deccan College, Jain Heritage Coordinator, Dr. Neelam Jain, Dr. PBT Sable Sir, Dr. Mamta Jain. I heartily invited you all for this particular conference, which was organized by Deccan College and Jain Mahasabha, which is working for conservation for Jain heritage. Surely your knowledge has been increased today by attending the various sessions given by our archaeologists and professors. And on the behalf of the Shubchintak Foundation Trust, I assure you, whenever you are going to organize this kind of conference, you will find our support. Here, it is I feel proud because I was a student, as sir mentioned, I was a student in this college and I attended the HMC course in 2019. And it was really a wonderful course. And whoever is not attended, I will say, like, you should come forward and attend this kind of course in this college. And just thank you all. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So once again, thanks to the three organizations, that is the Tirth Sant, the TSM Mahasabha, then the another Shubh Chantak Foundation Trust, as well as what is the third organization, ma'am? Yeah. So I thanks to all the members of the Jain Trust who are come forward for the collaboration for this particular workshop on a very, very special topic. And on the behalf of Deccan College, we are always welcome such kind of topics, very micro topics, so that the students, they can enjoy this kind of lectures of the expertise on the particular, very, very particular topics. So once again, I thanks to them. And now I will call our few participants here, because of the shortage of the time. We can't give the certificate to all the students. Deccan College students, they can take the certificate from me. Yeah. I will read the name and I will request our manager, Singh sir, please come on the stage, as well as Dr. Neelam Jain ma'am, Mamta Jain ma'am, Akshay ji. First participant, Kanalmati. Yes, come fast. Yes. Sakina. Shruti. Mandar. अतुल कुशवाहा, आइए। तरन्नुम, प्रितेश देशमुख, शुभम बेल्लार, प्रितेश करून म्हणा. शुभम बेल्लार, चेतना, शशांक बाबू, ऐश्वर्या थळे, नेक्स्ट नाम लगा. रोहित चकोले, प्लीज कम फास्ट. महेश चंद्र, शर्मिला चिन्हा दिए. आमे ओशिन बाम, गौरी मोरे, गणेश, सुधाकर मोरे, देवेश शाह, सुलक्षणा रानडे, रिया बम, हाँ जी. प्रकाश गायकवाड, वैशाली दुगर, वैशाली दुगर.